Hello, my name is Balin Fieldson. I am a creator of all sorts of things digital, and I am here to talk today about building graphics for uh, display in video games where you need to have really high speed video display and you want to have very high quality visuals at the same time. So AAA games out there all use a variety of tricks to achieve this. And I'm going to examine two of them, which are diffuse and normal mapping of a given model in order to give it a realistic appearance and at very little graphics cost in display. So you can use this kind of technique if you have photogrammetry captured objects and you want to make a really high quality image, or excuse me, high quality model that you can also use inside of your games out of that photogrammetry capture. So you should pay attention to that if you're interested in that sort of thing. I'm going to give you a little bit of background information about models. And this is for some of the beginners out there. Models are created out of polygons. Polygons are made out of vertexes. Those are each of the points. Each vertex has an X, Y, and Z coordinate. So if you take all of the vertexes that make up a polygon and average their point, then you've got the central point of that model. Now you can define the axis of that model, the origin in Blender, and that's shown as a little dot all the time. In this case, it's that dot that's right there in the middle of this baseball that's showing on my own video. Um, that's where it is in X, Y, and Z space. Models also have a texture map, and that's called a UV map because we've already used the X and Y coordinate values. So UV maps inform the render process of the textures that are shown on the polygon when it shows up in your world space. Normal maps are depth maps, which use their color value to provide extra information about the surface. So your R, G, and B value of the pixel instead affect the space, the distance that it should be placed away from the surface for the purpose of shading and shadowing and light display inside of a game, which is really important stuff. So this whole process for making your normal map with the other part is called baking. I bet you didn't think that you were going to learn about baking in a digital environment, huh? It's actually a render process, and we're going to use the Blender Cycles render process for this whole thing. So I'm going to go into my Blender environment here and hit Control N to get a brand new fresh startup file, and I'm going to hit the file menu here at the top and go to open, and we're going to open up this download that I've provided a link to for a baseball file. And this file is a pretty complex object. We wouldn't want to use it unless we're making the game entirely about that baseball. But it is a really nice image that has been created. So I just right-clicked on the base of the baseball, and X button on the keyboard causes it to be deleted, and then I want to join all of the parts of this baseball together. So I just right-clicked on the ball, and then right-click on this middle lumpy stuff, and then the seams, and then these blobs here around it are another object. So that's all together now as a single object, and I'm going to hit Control J to join it. And so now I'm going to look in my outliner view, and hit the plus there, and this object is called ball lace bumps, and there it is as one entire object. So I need to add another object exactly where this one is. And in order to do that, I need to move my 3D cursor to its space. So I'm going to right click on it, and that puts the cursor on it, and I'm going to press Shift S, and I'm going to say cursor to selected, and that moves the 3D cursor to it, and that's delineated by this red and white thing here. I'm going to hold down on my middle mouse button and rotate around the baseball to show how that works. So there's that baseball all showing in the middle of the screen, and with my cursor set right on it, I'm going to press Shift A, and that's going to give me the opportunity to add a mesh. And I'm going to move the selector over to UV sphere, and the UV sphere that I'm going to use in this case. So this option menu down here is it tells us about the UV sphere that we just added, and it's really important to make your changes right after you add it, because it's gone after that. You don't get the option to make any after the fact adjustments to your sphere, but instead of 32 segments, I'm going to give this one 64, and the rings I'm going to change from 16 to 32, and I see at a size of 1, this is just a little bit bigger than the sphere part of the baseball. So I'm going to change this to 0.96 and press enter, and then it is then smaller than the size of the ball. And it's really important to click this generate UVs button, because then you don't have to do any unwrapping to make your UVs. You've got your sphere already set. If you are making a new object, you'll want to use a variety of ways of unwrapping it, which I don't have enough time in a day to talk about how to do all of that. So we're going to stick with just the subject at hand today, which is generating the normal. So click that box that says generate UVs, and then allow me to look at the instructions. Okay, so we're going to need to add, we got that. Okay, we now need to add an image to our scene. So split the view, give yourself some space over here on the right, because we're going to be doing stuff in here, and change this interface over to a UV image editor. UV image editor lets us make changes to the way that the UV works for a given object. And we're going to need to add a new image to this. So hit new image and change this to normal, and that's what we call this. And we're going to need a 4096 size instead of 1024, because 4096 is 4K times 4, and that gives us that value. We can copy it with Control C, paste it with Control V, and okay, I'm going to use the middle mouse or the roller ball middle cursor rolly thing to scroll out, and it's just like page down and page up, but I don't think page down and page up actually do anything in Blender. Well, I mean, they probably do, but I don't know what they do. I'll look that up later. So now that I've got a new image called a normal, I need to somehow apply this to that ball that I made earlier. And so I need to select that object in the scene array, sphere, that's already selected. And I need to go over to the material tab and add a material to it. I'm going to call this material baseball. So that's the baseball material on sphere. And I'm going to rename sphere so that I don't mistake it for something else, like, because it's going to be a baseball and we're going to name it that. And if I left it named sphere, then it would join a bunch of other objects named sphere that are in my project that I have no idea what they are, and I left that way because I am a sloppy, lazy person and probably shouldn't be explaining any of this to you. So here is baseball, and it is okay, it's my material. I've got it set, and I need to look at it in the node editor and add that image that I made to it. So I'm going to split my view again, this time vertically, and open up the node editor. And it starts off really small. I can roll in on it here. And the reason why there's stuff in it is because I added that material. If you didn't add the material, you won't see stuff in it. So you should go back and do that. And you'll want to hit Shift A in here, and you'll find lots of things. And we want a texture that is an image texture. And man, there are so many things inside of this menu. Sorry to lay all this on you at the same time, but this is like the easiest way of going about this. After you've clicked it, you're going to get it under your cursor, and you have to put it somewhere in this node editor. And then now that it's placed, there's this little tiny browse image to be linked thing. You got to click on that, and then you get this. You select your normal that you made earlier, and oh my gosh, this is the anyhow. So after you've got that, you want to set its color output to the displacement input of the material output, which makes sense if you're looking at all of this, but oh wow, like try to tell somebody to do that without them looking at what's going on, and they're going to laugh at you at how difficult this all sounds. And it's not a color data, we're going to change it to that. Anyhow, all right, so we've got an image texture. It's in here. It's set as our normal. It's there, ready to receive the information about the baseball that's around it. So we need to first select the high complexity object, which is ball lace bumps, and then hold down Shift and select the low complexity object that has our image texture waiting to act as the normal map for it. And then we're going to go over to the render menu, because remember, baking is a render process. And down to very nearly the bottom, where bake probably won't be open unless you've played with it already, and where you want to open that up. And this is not a scenario where we want to bake using ambient occlusion. We're going after normal this time. And again, look at all these options, guys and gals, and any other identification that you might have. There's everything in here that you might want to receive from a more complicated model onto your other model. So we're just going to go with the normal right now, since that's what we're talking about. And we're going to check this box that says selected to active. And selected to active means that we can select one object and then the object we want to bake to, and all of the selected objects are going to bake onto whatever the last thing that you selected is. And you want to use that whole shift select method to get that done. Otherwise it doesn't load into the buffer array in a reliable order. Anyhow, so and down here in ray distance, I'm going to change this to 0.1 because that gives a nice distant cage, and this is a pretty bumpy baseball object that we're dealing with. And then I'm going to press the bake button. It takes about 30 seconds to bake, and it's all done inside of the CPU. At least to bake a normal mesh at 4K, it takes about 30 seconds. That's not very long, so we're gonna slog through it here and wait real time inside of the video. I know. So there we go. There's a normal map. It looks really good. There's not a lot of reverse stuff in there, and the stuff that is the laces, which this is a this is a good looking normal map as far as I'm concerned. If you look real close, you'll see a pattern of grids that show up on here, and that's because this sphere is round and it's wrapping around a gridded sphere. And this normal map does what you would normally get out of using the smooth shading option on a given object. So you don't want to switch this over to smooth shading and then try to apply this kind of a technique. They don't mix well. Uh, Anyhow, don't use smooth shading is, I guess, what I'm getting at here. Don't ever. And oh, where was I before I started ranting? Oh, we have this, and it outputs onto the material, and we want to save it. So I'm going to go ahead and go into image and save as image, and change out of the 2 projects that you've already done trying to make a decent tutorial, and create a new directory that is your baseball holder, and we're going to change this over to be named baseball normal. Okay, so save that as an image, and it's a PNG file, and it's a 4K normal file. Woo! So got that out. We're next going to want to add another image. This is going to be our diffuse map. That's the diffuse means color parts. The normal way that light reflects from that object in color, and in RGB at that. So diffuse is also referred to, oh gosh, there's so many different ways that people talk about this, and I'm not going to get into it. Maybe I will if I can record over it, and I am not the usual lazy person that I am. So I'm going to add another node to my node editor up here, and it's going to hold that. So I move my mouse over here and hit Shift A, and then go over to texture, and then go to image texture, and then move it somewhere. I'm going to put it up top here, and again press the little tiny button, and then go to diffuse. So this is now my image diffuse, and I'm going to take its color output, and I'm going to input it to the surface over here of the material output. So the image texture color node gets connected to the material output surface node, and make sure you have diffuse in there, because if you don't, this next step's not going to work. Ball, lace, bumps, and baseball is still selected over here in my 3D view because I haven't changed any of that. If you have deselected your objects in the interim, then go ahead and reselect them using that shift and click technique. You can right click on them in the 3D menu, or you can use the outline view over here and click and then shift click on the lower complexity last. So the object that you want to map to is the last thing that you want to select. And then go over to back over to your render menu back here in bake, and instead of normal we want to bake the diffuse, and since we have the diffuse receiver here set to surface on the color and the diffuse value down here at the bottom, that should all, and the selected to active checked here, and we've got a ray distance value of 0.1, which should really reach all the way around it, and we can press the bake button. Now this one, we got a warning. It's okay though, it's going to work on it. This is going to take us half an hour, and I'm just going to magically vanish and then come back a half hour later while the thing is at done. Anyway, well, I'm back and it is done. As you can see, there is now this really nice diffuse map available to me here in the interface. And I'm going to take that, and that diffuse map is already set as the surface material output of our ball lace bumps over of our baseball object. So I'm going to make this ball lace bumps object vanish, and that leaves just baseball object here. And we're currently viewing it in the solid mode. I'm going to change it over to material mode, and that way it shows us the combination of the diffuse and the um, normal view. And as you can see, that looks like a really high resolution model, and it's perfectly round appearing because we went ahead and made it out of more polys than it would have been made out of by default as a sphere. And so yeah, this is looking good. This is gonna be all sorts of usable. In order to actually use it in the game, we're gonna want to save it and save the model part of the format and this new diffuse image. So we're gonna go to image here, and we're gonna say save as image, and we're gonna call this one baseball diffuse. And I know, I'm trying to use my keyboard. This is Stinky, or Harvey is his proper name, but he doesn't answer to it. He answers to Stinky, so, well, he got to pick his own name. Sorry about all the extra time spent there, but he wants to hang out. Yeah, he's a good boy. So now I've got the diffuse object and the diffuse image saved. I would like to save the model. That is done using the export option. And if you don't have the ability to export wavefront objects, then you'll have to install that add-on into the Blender. Yeah, for now, just go into the directory that you created. It's going to be at the top of your recent there, and call it whatever it is that you want to call it. I'm going to leave it Alex Baseball, and remember, when you build something using this, to credit the original author if you're grabbing some of their art. Don't be a jerk. So yeah, I just exported the object file, so that gives us um, the the materials and the object in that same folder. So now I can switch out to Unity and use this model in there and make it all part of a Unity object. And I'll decide whether I'm going to include that in this tutorial or do another one in the future. But for now, I would like you to please subscribe to my channel. It's down there below. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. And if you want to learn any more about full dome display techniques, check out this channel, and also go to cosmicorbiters.com. And yeah, check out my blog and my various offerings up on there. And it has been awesome, but it's come to an end.